My name is Outten. I'm 33, and in 7 months I buried both of my parents. I sold our old family house in Greenville, North Carolina, and bought a small condo on the coast, 2 blocks from the water. The morning of day 2, before I'd even unpacked the kitchen, my adopted brother Trent walked in, lifted my keys off the entry table and slid them into his jacket pocket. "You don't need this house," he said. "Tomorrow I'm traveling with my wife's family. I can drop you off at a shelter." I stood there. I didn't argue. 1 hour later, I texted him 3 words. "Look inside Dad's lockbox." He called me back in 4 minutes. But what happened in the 28 days after that was the part nobody, including me, saw coming. Welcome back to the channel. This is a place for women who set boundaries the right way, with documents, dignity, and the courage to stay calm in the rooms where everyone else is yelling. If you've ever been the one who showed up while the rest of your family just collected, this story is for you. Drop a comment, hit subscribe, and stay with me. What happens at that beach reception, you're going to want to see. The 14 months before my mother died were the longest 14 months of my life. Ovarian cancer. Stage 4 by the time the scans came back, which meant treatment, but not a cure. I asked my boss at Pruitt & Hayes, the probate firm where I'd worked as a paralegal for 10 years, if I could shift to remote. He said yes the same hour. So I packed my laptop into the guest room of the house on Elm Street and moved back in. My mother's name was Helen. She'd been a kindergarten teacher for 27 years before the diagnosis. We turned my old childhood bedroom into a hospice room. The hospital bed came on a Wednesday. The oxygen concentrator hummed at the foot of it for the next year and change. I learned how to swap a cannula at 3 in the morning without turning on the overhead light. I learned which Walmart had the cheapest case of Ensure. I learned that my mother could squeeze my hand even when she couldn't form words. My brother Trent visited 3 times. I want to be specific about that, because for a long time afterward people would say, "Family processes grief differently." 3 visits in 14 months. About 2 hours each. His wife Whit never came inside. Once she dropped him in the driveway and waited in the car with the engine running. He stayed 40 minutes that day. I wasn't angry then. I was too tired to be angry. Anger takes energy, and I didn't have any. I had a yellow legal pad on the kitchen counter where I wrote things like "new tubing Thursday" and "refill the anti-nausea" and "call about the catheter." And that was where my brain lived. The version of me that could feel things had been folded up and put in a drawer somewhere. I figured I'd unpack her later, when there was time. Dad died first, actually. Heart attack. Sudden, in January. He was watering the rose bushes. The neighbor found him in the grass. I drove home from work and sat with him until the funeral home came. Mom watched from the kitchen window because she was too weak to come out. She didn't cry until 2 days later, in the casket pick-out room, when she put her hand on the lid of the simple pine box and whispered, "He'd hate the brass handles." After that, it was just the 2 of us. Just me, her, the lesson plans she kept tracing with 1 finger, and the cancer. Mom died in October on a Tuesday morning with her hand resting on top of mine. The hospice nurse, a soft-voiced woman named Anita, sat with me for 2 hours after the breath went out of the room. She didn't say anything. She just stayed. I'd remember her for that. The funeral was the following Saturday at Riverside Cemetery in Greenville. Light rain. 40-some people in dark coats. I'd ordered the standing sprays myself, the program leaflets, the soloist. I'd called the church. I'd written the obituary in the kitchen at 1 in the morning with a cup of tea going cold next to the laptop. Trent arrived 20 minutes late. Whit was driving, and the first thing I heard her say as they crossed the wet grass was, "I told you we should have left earlier. The parking's a nightmare." She kissed my cheek. She'd never kissed my cheek before. "Iris," she whispered, "I'm so sorry for your loss." It was the most personal sentence she'd ever spoken to me. Trent hugged me. I let him. He smelled like cologne I didn't recognize, expensive in a way that didn't fit him. He'd put on weight since the last visit, and his eyes were red. He cried at the service. Whit reached across him and patted his hand twice. After the burial, people drifted back to the house on Elm for sandwiches and coffee. I'd hired a teenage girl from the church to help refill platters. I was standing at the kitchen counter rinsing forks when Whit cornered me. She had a friend with her I hadn't met. Mid-60s, blonde bob, careful makeup. Whit introduced her as my mother, Diane Caldwell. She drove up from Wilmington just to be here. Diane took my hand in both of hers. Sweetheart, we are so sorry. Her grip was firm. She held on a beat longer than I expected. Then Whit asked, perfectly casual, Iris, did your mom ever say anything about her jewelry? Any of the pieces? I set the fork I was holding into the rack. I didn't answer. I picked up the empty sandwich platter, walked it back to the dining room, and made a fresh stack. When I came back to the kitchen, Trent was standing in the hallway looking down at me. He'd come up from somewhere upstairs. From the back of the house where my dad's office was. I hadn't seen him go up. You good? I asked. Yeah, he said. Just looking around. 3 months later, on a Friday in mid-January, we sat in the conference room of Bryson and Park, the small estates firm in downtown Greenville that had handled Mom and Dad's paperwork for the last 15 years. Tom Bryson read the will aloud. He was 72, gentle, the kind of attorney who still wore a bow tie. The will was clean and specific. The house at 1418 Elm Street, plus its contents. To me. The loan codicil, signed and notarized 14 months before Mom died, stated the bequest was made in recognition of Iris's role as primary caregiver to both parents during their final years of life. The brokerage account, the term life policy, my father's pickup, and the savings account at First Citizens, split 60-40, with the larger share going to Trent. Tom explained the dollar values were roughly equivalent once you accounted for the house's appraisal and the upkeep arrears. Roughly. The intent, he said, was balance. Trent went red across the forehead. He didn't say anything during the reading. Whit did. Her hand went up like she was in a classroom. Mr. Bryson, sorry, just to clarify, this version is the one that's actually valid? There isn't an earlier draft? This is the only executed will, Tom said. Signed July, codicil October the following year, both notarized. Whit nodded slowly. Got it. Just making sure. I didn't say anything in that room. I signed the acknowledgement page. I shook Tom's hand. I walked out to the parking lot with Trent and Whit 10 paces behind me. At my car, Whit caught up. She put her hand on my forearm. Her wedding ring was new, a bigger stone than I remembered. Iris, she said in her sweetheart voice, we should all sit down, like a family meeting. Let's be honest about how to split this so nobody feels weird. I looked at her hand on my arm, then at her face. The will is what Dad wrote, I said. I didn't write it. She gave a tight smile and let go. That afternoon, I drove back to Pruitt and Hayes and asked the receptionist to pull a certified copy of everything for me, one for the office file and one for my own. Then I drove to the SunTrust branch on Memorial Drive and opened a safety deposit box. 247. I put the copies inside and slid the drawer shut myself. In the house that night, on a hook above the kitchen sink, I noticed the small brass key to Dad's cedar lockbox. I didn't open the box. Not yet. 5 months passed. I lived in the house alone. I worked from the kitchen table. I closed Dad's office door and didn't open it. I let Mom's reading chair sit empty in the den and never sat in it. I changed the sheets on my old bed every 2 weeks because the smell of the hospice didn't leave the room until the third change. One Saturday in April, I stood in the middle of the living room with a cup of coffee in my hand and looked at the wallpaper. Pale green vines, hung in 1989. Dad had complained about it for 30 years. I realized I couldn't stay another month. The house wasn't a home anymore. It was a museum I'd been working as the unpaid curator of, and I was the only visitor. I called a realtor on Monday morning, listed Wednesday, open house the following Sunday. We had 3 offers by Tuesday, and on the 4th, I accepted. A young couple, second baby on the way, the husband had grown up 2 streets over, $410,000, closing in 35 days. I didn't tell Trent until the contract was already signed. I called him from my car in the grocery store parking lot, the way you call someone you don't want to give a chance to argue. You're selling Mom and Dad's house? His voice tightened. It's not Mom and Dad's anymore, I said. It's mine, by the will, and I can't live here. I'm putting it on the market and using my share to buy a place on the coast. There was a long pause. Then I heard Whit, on the line in the background, saying something I couldn't make out. Trent muffled the phone with his palm. When he came back, he sounded different. Honey, he said. He'd never called me honey in his life. We need to talk about that money. Like, a real conversation. Whit and I have been thinking about a few things, and we could really use... I have to go, I said. I'm at Harris Teeter. I hung up. I should have known then. Anyone with a normal sibling would have known. But I'd just spent 14 months pretending I wasn't drowning, and pretending is a habit you can't quit overnight. I just kept moving. I packed the house in 8 weeks. I picked the condo in Corolla in 3 weekends. I closed cash, $340,000, on a 1-bedroom on the 4th floor, 2 blocks from the Currituck Sound. Move-in date, the first weekend of June. I didn't open the lockbox yet. I almost did. Twice. I decided to wait until I was in the new place. The movers got it done before lunch. 8 boxes from Greenville, 2 pieces of furniture I'd kept, Mom's reading chair after all, and Dad's cedar lockbox. I'd had them load the box onto the truck personally, so nothing happened to it in transit. It had sat in the corner of his office since I was a kid. He'd built it himself in 1991 out of leftover cedar from a barn job. 22 inches long, 16 wide, 10 deep. Brass corners. A small lock he'd put in himself with a tiny brass key. The movers carried it up to the 4th floor and set it where I pointed, in the master bedroom closet on the 2nd shelf. I closed the closet door. The cedar smell stayed in the closet like a held breath. After they left, I stood on the balcony for a long time. The condo was small, 640 square feet, 1 bedroom, a galley kitchen, a balcony just big enough for 2 folding chairs. The water wasn't ocean exactly. It was Currituck Sound, but you could smell the salt from upstairs, and on a clear day you could see the lighthouse over at Corolla. The HOA dues were $315 a month. I'd run the numbers 4 times. I could carry it on my salary alone. I'd done it. I walked down to the beach at the end of the day. June sun, low, golden. I sat in the sand in my work pants and let the wind take my hair around, and for the first time in 5 months, for the first time since Mom, I cried. Not big, not loud, just a few minutes of leaking eyes, the kind that don't even ask permission. I felt grief, and underneath the grief, something I hadn't expected. Lightness. Like a piece of luggage I'd been carrying for years had been set down on a bench, and I could walk away if I wanted to. That night, I slept 9 hours, the first 9 straight in over a year. I'd given Trent the lobby visitor code 2 weeks earlier when he asked. He'd called offering to help me move. I'd said no, but the offer felt like effort. I told him the code anyway, in case of emergency. He'd said, "Cool, I'll save it." Tomorrow, I'd wake up free. That was what I thought. The cedar box sat in the closet. I told myself I'd open it Saturday. I had time now. Sunday morning, June 2nd. I woke up at 7, made coffee in the new percolator, and took the mug out to the balcony. The Sound was glass flat. A heron stood in the shallows 200 yards out, perfectly still, doing whatever herons do at 7 in the morning. I sat in the folding chair in my robe and let the steam come off the cup. I thought, I'm going to do this every day for the rest of my life. At 9:14, a red Ford F-150 pulled into the visitor lot. I noticed because the lot was nearly empty, and because the truck stopped diagonally across 2 spaces, the way Trent always parked. I watched from the balcony. The driver's door opened. Trent got out in a polo shirt and shorts, sunglasses on his head. The passenger door opened. Whit. White capri pants, sandals, oversized purse. They walked to the building entrance. Trent punched the visitor code into the lobby keypad. I had given him that code 2 weeks ago, in case of emergency. I watched him use it now like it was his code, like he lived here, and I felt my stomach do a small, slow turn. The knock on my door came 40 seconds later. They'd taken the elevator straight up, hadn't called from the lobby, hadn't called from the parking lot, hadn't called the night before. Just appeared. I opened the door in my robe. Trent walked past me into the living room without waiting to be invited. He looked around once, a slow scan, the way a buyer walks a house, and then he sat down in my new white linen armchair. Whit followed him in. She closed the door behind herself. She locked the deadbolt without asking. Then she gave me a smile, the soft one she'd given me at the funeral. "This is cute, Iris," Whit said. "Really cute." I should have known by the way he sat down, by the way she locked the door, by the way his sunglasses came down off his head and went onto the coffee table next to my book like he owned the surface. I poured them both coffee anyway. That's the kind of person I was on day 1 of June. Trent took the coffee. He didn't drink it. He set it on the coffee table next to his sunglasses and leaned back into my chair. "So look," he started, "Whit and I were talking last night. And honestly, Iris, this whole thing, the condo, the move, all of it, it's a lot for someone alone. You know? Like, this is a lot of square footage and a lot of monthly expense for one person who just lost her parents." 640 square feet, I said. "And the math works." Whit jumped in, soft and sad. "Sweetheart, honestly, this is too much for someone alone. We've been so worried about you." Trent stood up. He walked over to the entry table. My keys were lying there in the small ceramic bowl I'd had since college. 2 keys on a small ring, front door of the unit, mailbox down in the lobby. He picked them up. He looked at them for a second. Then he opened his jacket and slid them into the inside breast pocket. Zipped the pocket closed. I watched him do all of it. "You don't need this house," Trent said. He turned to face me. He was using the voice our father had used on the dog when the dog had done something it shouldn't have. "Tomorrow I'm traveling with Whit's family. We're driving to Asheville for the week. I can drop you off at a shelter on the way out of town." Whit nodded. "Just for a couple weeks. We can figure everything out, you know, more rationally. Bart said he could help with the listing." I tilted my head. "Bart." "My brother. Realtor. He thinks we could get $380 for this place, probably more in season. Just, let us help, sweetheart." I noticed her phone screen, lit up on the arm of my couch where she'd set it. Zillow agent notification. Listing draft. Address line, 4127. Soundfront Way, Unit 412. Mine. She saw me see it. She turned the phone face down. I didn't say anything for a full beat. Then I said, "Okay." Trent looked at me. Whit looked at me. I'd surprised them both. "Okay," Trent said. "You've got the keys," I said. "I think this conversation's done." For about 30 seconds, nobody moved. I think they were waiting for me to plead, to explain, to get small. That's the script for the version of me they thought they were here to meet. The exhausted caregiver in a robe at 9 in the morning with hospice still in her hair. I think Whit had even rehearsed the next part of the conversation in the car on the way over. Mediation language, family compromise, the soft hand on the forearm. I just stood there with my coffee. "Iris," Whit said carefully, "we're trying to help you." "I heard you," I said. Trent looked at his wife. She looked at her phone, which was still face down. He looked back at me. "So you're cool with this?" he said. "You're cool letting us handle things for you?" "I think you should head out," I said. "You said you're driving to Asheville tomorrow. That's a long drive. You'll want to rest tonight." "Iris, honey," Whit tried again. "Let me give you a hug." She moved toward me. I stepped back. Not dramatically. Just one neat step into the kitchen, hand still on the coffee mug, the counter between us now. She stopped. "Okay," she said brightly, like we'd just made a deal. Okay. We'll call you tonight. We'll get this all worked out. They walked out the way they came. Trent took his sunglasses off the coffee table. Whit picked up her purse and her phone. He paused at the door, hand on the frame, like he wanted to say something paternal. He didn't think of anything. He left. The deadbolt was still locked from Whit's hand earlier. I unlocked it, opened the door, looked down the hall, and watched them walk to the elevator. He punched the button. He didn't look back. They got in. The doors closed. I shut my door. I locked the deadbolt myself this time. I walked to the kitchen drawer next to the refrigerator. In a small Ziploc bag taped to the inside back wall of the drawer was a second set of keys to the unit. I'd had them made on the day I closed. I always had a spare. 10 years at a probate firm teaches you that. I sat down. I made another coffee. Then I picked up my phone. I pulled up Trent's contact. I looked at his name. I looked at his photo. An old one. Him at 17, in a graduation gown, with his arm around my shoulders. I was 12 in that photo. I'd cropped the picture so it was just the two of us, no mom and dad in frame. I'd taken it because I'd liked having an older brother. I tapped the message box. I typed 3 words. Look inside Dad's lockbox. I read it. I sent it. 4 minutes passed. 4 minutes, 12 seconds, by the clock on the microwave. The phone vibrated on the counter. Trent's name on the screen. I let it ring. Voicemail picked up. I muted the phone. Then I called Carolyn Pruitt at her cell. Carolyn was the named partner at Pruitt and Hayes. She'd hired me 10 years before, when I was 23, and a community college legal assistant certificate had been the only line on my resume. She'd taught me how a will gets challenged, how a codicil holds, how to read a deed in under 90 seconds. She was 58, gray-haired, divorced twice, and she answered her cell on Sundays. Iris, tell me. He came over, I said. He took my keys. He said he'd drop me at a shelter. There was a brief silence on her end, the kind a lawyer makes when she's deciding whether to be a lawyer or a friend first. All right, she said. Monday morning, my office, 8:30. Bring your phone with the texts. Don't engage. Don't argue. Let it run. Already doing it, I said. That's my girl. The will copies? In 247 at SunTrust Memorial. Pull them tomorrow. Bring them up. I will. I hung up. I made a list on the yellow legal pad I'd brought up from Greenville, the pad I used to write things like New Tubing Thursday. Now I wrote, Monday, SunTrust 247, Carolyn, 8:30. Concierge, do not let tea up. Rekey deadbolt this evening. I underlined the last item twice. Then I called Coastal Lock and Key in Corolla and asked if they had a same-day appointment. They did. 5 o'clock that evening. The first voicemail from Trent came at 11:43. It was the first of 5. I let them all go to voicemail. I wrote down the time of each one on the legal pad, and after I listened, I wrote down a 1-line summary of the content. I didn't reply. 11:43. Iris, what lockbox? I don't know what you're talking about. Just call me back. This is dumb. Confused. Trying to play it casual. 12:17. Look, I'm not in the mood for games. Whit thinks you're trying to mess with our heads. Call. Me. Back. Annoyed. Whit in the background somewhere. 1:55. I just got off the phone with Whit's mom. She thinks you're being ungrateful. I told her you'd had a hard year. Just call. Triangulating. Bringing in Diane. 4:22. Iris, if you don't call me back by the end of today, I'm going to talk to a lawyer. I'm not playing. I'm serious. We have rights here too. Threat. Empty. But on the record. 8:09. I'm driving to Greenville tomorrow morning. If there's a lockbox at the old house, I'll find it. Whatever you think is in there, it's not yours alone. You don't get to keep stuff from family. I listened to that last one twice, not because it shook me, because I wanted to make sure I had the exact wording for Carolyn. I transcribed it word for word onto the pad. He'd said, whatever you think is in there, it's not yours alone. I underlined that sentence. He didn't know the house had closed on the 28th. The new owners had taken possession yesterday. The cedar box wasn't at 1418 Elm Street anymore. It was here, in my closet, on the second shelf. He'd find an empty bedroom upstairs and a young father painting it for the nursery. At 5 o'clock, the locksmith came. 45 minutes, $210, new deadbolt cylinder, new keys. He gave me 3. I gave him 1 back to keep on file at his shop as proof of work and tipped him 20. I taped the new keys to the inside back wall of the kitchen drawer. The next morning, I drove 2 hours to Greenville and opened safety deposit box 247. The SunTrust branch on Memorial was quiet on a Monday at 10. I'd called ahead. The branch manager, a woman named Lorraine I'd known for 6 years, walked me back without small talk. She unlocked the room. She slid the drawer out and set it on the table. She left. I sat down. I put on my reading glasses. I opened the lid. 3 things inside. The first was a certified copy of my parents' last will and testament, signed July of the year before Mom died. The codicil, signed in October, 3 weeks before her diagnosis was upgraded to terminal. The codicil specified the house, the contents, and an explicit reason. In recognition of Iris's role as primary caregiver to both parents during their final years of life. There was an attached attorney affidavit from Tom Bryson confirming Mom and Dad had been of sound mind, separately interviewed. No coercion. The second was a handwritten letter from my father. 2 pages, lined notebook paper, his careful engineering school cursive. Dated 6 weeks before he died. He couldn't have known then how soon he'd go. The letter began, Iris, your mother and I both know who has carried this family. He went on for 2 pages, calm and specific, saying he and Mom had watched. They'd watched who showed up to the hospital that time in 2019 when he'd had the gallbladder surgery. They'd watched who answered the phone every Sunday. They'd watched who quit her social life for 14 months without ever once making it about herself. The last line of the letter said, "Don't let him take this house from you. Use it for yourself. Promise me." The third was a sealed envelope, cream paper, my mother's handwriting on the front. It said, Iris, read when you need it, not before. I didn't open it. I knew I would, eventually, but not yet. I put it back in the drawer with the will and Dad's letter. I took photographs of the will and the letter with my phone, both sides of each page. I emailed the photos to Carolyn before I left the room. I locked the drawer back. The cedar smell wasn't in these papers. They smelled like vault air and lemon polish. They smelled like the world telling me, here is what is true. 2 days later, on Tuesday afternoon, the buzzer went off on my apartment door. Not the lobby buzzer, the unit buzzer. Which meant whoever it was had gotten upstairs without going through the concierge. I checked the peephole. Diane Caldwell was standing in my hallway in a coral linen dress, holding a green Pyrex casserole dish with a plastic lid. She saw the peephole darken. She smiled. Iris, sweetheart, it's Diane. May I come in for a few minutes? I opened the door 6 inches. How did you get up? Oh, a lovely young man let me in downstairs. I told him I was visiting my daughter-in-law's sister. I let her step into the entry. I did not invite her past it. I closed the door behind her. I led her out to the balcony and seated her in one of the 2 folding chairs. I kept the slider open behind us, but I did not sit. She set the Pyrex on the small bistro table between us. The lid had a label written in black marker. Diane, Caldwell Family Cookout 2024. It's still warm, she said. Chicken and rice. I make it for everyone going through a hard time. My pastor swears by it. That's kind of you. She talked for 20 minutes. She talked about family healing. She talked about how Trent had been crying. She talked about how the years go fast and how regret is the heaviest thing a woman can carry into her 70s. She talked about compromise. She used the word sweetheart 11 times. I counted. Toward the end, she leaned forward and put her hand on my knee. Iris, honey, she said, family doesn't keep secrets from family. We're all just trying to find a way back to each other. I didn't answer that one. I asked instead, Mrs. Caldwell, would you like me to refrigerate this casserole? She blinked, surprised by the pivot. Oh, yes, sure. Put it in the fridge, sweetheart. I walked the Pyrex inside. I put it on the middle shelf next to a half-empty quart of milk. There was a folded note tucked under the dish, on the lid. I read it without unfolding it all the way. 3 words in her handwriting. Call your brother. I left the note exactly where it was. I came back to the balcony and stood with my hand on the slider frame. Mrs. Caldwell, I said, I think you should go now. She went. That night my phone started lighting up. I'd been re-added to the family group chat. It was called the Outten family. I'd left it 4 months earlier without saying anything, because I'd needed quiet. They'd added me back without asking. Members: Trent, Whit, Diane, a man named Bart, Whit's older brother, whom I'd met twice, a woman named Linda, Bart's wife, and a name I didn't recognize at all, Marlene Caldwell, who turned out to be Whit's cousin in Charlotte. 6 of them. 1 of me. 47 messages came in within 2 hours. Whit, 8:13. Hey Iris, we're worried about you. Can you respond, please? We just want to know you're okay. Trent, 8:15. Iris, come on. Diane, 8:20. Family, let's please remember that grief affects people differently. We need to be patient with Iris but firm. She needs us right now. Bart, 8:31. Hey Iris, real quick. I run Caldwell Coastal Realty. I can list the condo in 48 hours. My client Brett's looking for a 1-bedroom in season. Just let me know. I read that one twice. He'd put his pitch into the family chat as if it were a casual offer, as if I'd asked. Whit, 9:06. She always was the favorite. Now she's the entitled one. Sorry, just being real. Diane, 9:10. Whitney. Whit, 9:11. I said sorry. Linda, 9:22. Sending love and prayers to everyone in this difficult time. Marlene, 9:45. Just got caught up reading. I'm so sorry y'all are going through this. Iris, sweetheart, you should know that family is forever. Money comes and goes. I screenshotted every message. I emailed the screenshots to Carolyn in batches. I muted the chat, but I did not leave it, because Carolyn had told me, the night before on the phone, not to leave. Let them talk, she'd said. Let them put it in writing. Writing is what we work with. I sat on my balcony at 10 o'clock that night with the slider closed behind me and listened to the slow rush of the sound. The condo lights of the units below mine glowed in soft yellow squares. The reception was Saturday, the HOA welcome event for new residents. I knew, without needing to think about it, that all 4 of them would show up. If you're still with me, you already know how this is going to feel. That moment when the quiet one finally produces the paper. I want you to see it the way I saw it. Drop a comment with 1 word, just say lockbox, so I know you're here. Hit subscribe if you haven't, and let's keep going. The reception is 6 days away. Wednesday morning, 8:30. I drove the 2 hours back to Pruitt and Hayes and sat in Carolyn's office. She'd cleared her morning. She read through everything on her dual monitors. The will, the codicil, Dad's letter. My phone transcripts of the 5 voicemails, the 47 group chat screenshots, the lobby footage of Sunday morning, which Robert the concierge had pulled and emailed me. The Zillow draft listing screenshot I'd grabbed from Whit's phone before she'd flipped it face down. Carolyn took notes on a yellow pad, the same kind of pad I used. We'd both been trained by the same boss decades apart. When she finished, she set her pen down. Iris, you have a clean case, she said. There is no equity claim here. The codicil is specific, the witnesses are clean, the affidavit is iron. Trent can hire a lawyer. He won't, but he could. And that lawyer will tell him to walk away. Whit's brother is exposed for unauthorized solicitation under North Carolina real estate licensing rules. Diane is exposed for what looks like deliberate spreading of false information to your neighbors. We don't sue any of them. We send cease and desist letters. We document. We move on with our lives. Okay. I'll have the letters drafted by Friday. 4 envelopes, 1 for each of them. We'll have them ready to serve. She paused. She took her glasses off. Iris, Can I ask you one thing as your friend? Not your lawyer? Sure. Why didn't you do this 6 months ago? I thought about it. I was tired, I said. And I wanted them to choose differently. I kept thinking, if I just stay quiet, maybe Trent will read the will and read his dad's letter and choose to be a brother. I didn't want to be the one who escalated it. She nodded. And now? She said. Now I'd like you to be my +1 Saturday at 6, the condo's HOA welcome reception. She smiled, the smallest smile, just one corner of her mouth. Iris, I'd love to. That same Wednesday afternoon, at 2:14, my phone buzzed with a notification from the condo security app. Lobby camera. Visitor arriving for Unit 412. I tapped through. Trent was standing at the front desk. Behind him, in a navy work shirt with a yellow patch on the shoulder, was a man holding a small tool bag. The patch said Coastal Lock and Key, the same company I'd used. I almost laughed. Of all the locksmiths in Corolla, there are 4, Trent had picked the one whose phone number was already in my call log from Sunday evening. I called Robert at the desk. Don't let him up, I said. He doesn't have authorization. Yes, ma'am, Robert said. I switched the app back to camera mode and watched on mute. Trent was arguing, his neck flushed, his hands open. The locksmith stood behind him with the patient expression of a man who'd seen this scene before. Robert said something, calm, gesturing with his hand. Trent slapped the desk lightly with his palm. The locksmith took a half step back. After 8 minutes, the locksmith said something to Trent, shook his head once, and walked out. Trent stayed another 4 minutes, arguing alone. Then Robert picked up the phone, and I felt my own phone vibrate in my hand. Mrs. Outten, your brother is asking me to give him a key from the master file. I told him I don't have a master file. You don't, I said. I changed the cylinder Sunday. Yes, ma'am, I figured. He's also saying you're emotionally unstable and that he's worried about your safety. I'm fine, Robert. I'm sitting on my balcony watching the camera. Robert chuckled into the phone. All right, I'll show him out. The keys Trent had taken from my entry table on Sunday opened nothing now. The new ones were in my kitchen drawer, on the tape, where I could see them every time I opened it. I'd had Coastal, the same shop he'd called, rekey my deadbolt before sunset that same day. I'd kept the receipt. I'd be glad I did. Thursday morning. I was in the elevator going down to the mailroom when the doors opened on the 3rd floor, and a woman about 71 stepped in. She had short white hair, oval gold glasses, and a tote bag from the Outer Banks Public Library. I'd seen her once or twice in the hall. Hi, she said. Marge Holcomb, I'm in 306. Iris Outten, 412. She studied me. Iris, she said. I think we need to have a little talk before Saturday. The doors opened on the lobby. We walked out together. She nodded at Robert and led me to one of the seating pods near the front windows. Honey, Marge said, sitting down and patting the seat beside her. I've had 2 women in this building call me this week about you, asking if I'd heard anything, asking if you seemed all right. Both of them said the same thing, that they'd been called by a woman named Diane, who was concerned about you. Diane said you'd just lost your parents and seemed to be acting unstable. She wanted to know if anyone in the building had seen anything alarming. I felt my jaw set. That's my brother's mother-in-law. Marge nodded slowly. I figured. I worked court reporter for 31 years up in Norfolk before I retired down here, Iris. I know what a smear campaign sounds like. She tried it on me too. I told her I'd just met you and you seemed perfectly fine, and she could call me again when she had a more interesting hobby. I smiled. Just a little. The first real smile in 3 days. The reception is Saturday at 6, Marge said. I'm sitting at table 4. I have an empty chair next to me. You take it. Bring your lawyer if you've got one. I have a feeling you do. I do. Then you're set, sweetheart. I'll have the chair waiting. She patted my arm and stood up and walked off with her library tote. I watched her go. I went back upstairs and laid out my navy dress for Saturday. Thursday evening, after the sun had dropped behind the building and the sound had gone gray, I opened the closet in my bedroom and pulled the cedar lockbox down off the shelf. I set it on the floor in front of me. I sat cross-legged in front of it the way I'd sat in front of the Christmas tree at 6 years old. The cedar smell came up like a held breath let out. Workshop. Dad's hands. Resin and pencil shavings. For a second I had to close my eyes. I unlocked it with the brass key. I lifted the lid. I'd left Mom's sealed envelope in safety deposit box 247 on Monday, but I hadn't taken anything out of the cedar box itself when I'd moved. The contents inside this one had been Dad's smaller things. His old watch, his wedding band, 2 photographs of him as a young man in fatigues, a small wooden carving of an owl he'd made the year I was born. Those things had been here the whole time, but on the inside of the lid, tucked into a thin canvas pocket I had never noticed in 25 years of looking at this box, was a second envelope. Cream paper. Mom's handwriting on the front. The same instruction. Iris. Read when you need it. Not before. She'd made 2 copies. One in the vault, one in the box. So I couldn't miss it. I untucked it. I slid my thumbnail along the seal. 2 pages. The letter was steady and clean, written in pen the way she wrote her grocery lists. It said, in her own words, that by the time I read this, someone would be telling me I owed them more than the will gave them. That they'd dress it up in family and in love. She told me not to believe it. She wrote, "Your father and I made the will the way we did because we watched. We watched who showed up. We watched who didn't. Boundaries are not betrayal. They are the last gift I can give you." I read it 3 times. Friday morning, Carolyn emailed me the drafts. 4 cease and desist letters on Pruitt and Hayes letterhead, each one specific, each one signed. Letter A, to Trent. Itemized list of the unauthorized acts, entering my home and removing my keys, attempting unauthorized lock changes, the threats in voicemail. Demand to cease all contact except through counsel. Certified mail required. Letter B, to Wit. Same baseline plus the unauthorized real estate listing draft, which Carolyn had screenshotted from a public Zillow agent portal I hadn't even known she could pull. Letter C, to Diane. Cease and desist plus a separate paragraph about the privacy violation involved in calling my neighbors to spread false claims about my mental state. Carolyn had cited the specific state statute. I read the citation twice. It felt good to read. Letter D, to Bart. Cease and desist plus a draft complaint to the North Carolina Real Estate Commission, copy enclosed, regarding unauthorized solicitation and using a relative's coercion to acquire a listing. I printed all 4. I addressed them by hand to make it personal. I sealed them in 4 legal-size envelopes, white, labeled in black pen. I put the 4 envelopes in my canvas tote, the one I'd carried to safety deposit box 247, the one that smelled faintly of cedar. I called Carolyn at 4 o'clock. Saturday confirmed, 6 p.m. start, meet me at the lobby at 5:45. I'll be in a navy dress. I'll be in a black blazer, she said. So we'll match. I laughed, and then I almost cried, because I hadn't laughed in months. I went to bed at 9 that night with the tote on the chair next to the bed and the letters inside it. I did not plan to hand them out unless I had to. I would only hand them out if the 4 of them came to the reception and made a scene. Carolyn and I had agreed. I knew, the way you know weather, that they were going to make me. Saturday. I woke at 6:15. The sound was silver. The herons were back. I made coffee, scrambled 2 eggs, ate at the small table in front of the slider. I'd laid out the dress the night before. Navy, knee-length, 3/4 sleeves. Low-heeled black pumps that wouldn't make me taller than Carolyn. My mother's pearl earrings, the small ones. The only piece of her jewelry I had taken from the house on Elm before the sale. I read Mom's letter one more time at the kitchen table. I read Dad's letter once. I put them both back in the cedar box and locked it. At 5:30, Marge knocked on my door. I told her I was going down at 5:45. She was early, in a lavender pantsuit and a small pearl necklace, looking like a woman who had testified in 3,000 courtrooms and never been late once. "You ready, honey?" "I think so." She looked at me a beat longer than necessary. Then she nodded. In the elevator going down, the floor numbers ticked off one at a time. The car was empty, except for us. Marge looked at her reflection in the brass panel. You don't need to prove a thing tonight, Iris. Just remember you live here. They don't. I don't need to prove I belong, I said quietly, more to myself than to her. I just need to remember I do. She turned and looked at me. She nodded once. The doors opened on the lobby. Carolyn was already there, by the front desk in her black blazer with a slim leather portfolio under her arm. So was Robert at the desk, who gave me a quick, small thumbs up I appreciated more than he could have known. And so was Trent. So was Whit. So was Diane, carrying a green Pyrex casserole dish with a foil-covered lid. So was Bart, in a tan realtor's blazer with a small enamel pin on the lapel. They were already there. This next part is the one I replayed in my head for weeks afterward. If you've ever stood in front of family who treated you like a problem to solve, this is the moment you want them to feel what you've been carrying. If this story is hitting you somewhere real, hit subscribe before we walk into that reception. And let me know in the comments, who's your Carolyn? The lobby of Soundfront condominiums had been turned into a small ballroom for the night. 6 round tables, white cloth, low centerpieces of hydrangeas in mason jars, a cheese board the size of a coffee table, sparkling cider in glass pitchers, a jazz playlist running soft from a speaker in the corner, the kind of jazz that no one is actually listening to. About 40 residents had gathered. Couples in their 70s, a pair of young mothers from the 3rd floor with their husbands. Mrs. Henley, the HOA president, 65, retired accountant, in a peach silk blouse with a tortoiseshell clip in her hair. She'd called the room to attention to introduce the 3 new residents who had moved in that month. And finally, she said warmly, our newest, Iris Outten, in Unit 412. Iris, give us a wave. I waved. Polite applause. I sat down at Marge's table, table 4. Carolyn took the seat to my left. Marge took the seat to my right. The empty chairs at our table, there were 2, stayed empty. At 6:18, the lobby doors opened. Diane came in first, with the Pyrex held in front of her like a peace offering, Trent behind her, Whit, Bart in the realtor's blazer. They had not been on the guest list because they were not residents. Diane walked straight up to Mrs. Henley. We're so sorry to crash, Mrs. Henley. We're family of the new resident, just here to support our Iris. Mrs. Henley, who had not been warned, did the gracious thing. She gestured them in. Diane set the Pyrex down on the side table next to the cheese board, the same green Pyrex from Tuesday, the casserole dish she had carried into my home with the note tucked under the lid. She had washed it and brought it back tonight like a flag. Carolyn beside me did not move. Marge, on my other side, did not move. I did not move. The jazz kept playing. Whit scanned the room. Her eyes found me. She walked toward our table, smiling her funeral smile. Trent followed. Diane followed. Bart trailed last, looking at the cheese board like a man calculating how long he had to stay. Diane reached our table first. She did not sit. She put one hand on the back of the empty chair next to me and squeezed the wood, the way you'd squeeze a podium. Iris, sweetheart, she said, at full volume, intentional, projecting. We all need to clear the air. Honey, you can't keep avoiding family. It's not healthy for you, and it's not fair to your brother. Maybe 30 heads in the room turned. The jazz kept playing, oblivious. Trent stepped up beside her. He looked tired. He looked like a man who had been driven somewhere by his wife and his mother-in-law and had not been asked what he wanted to do. Iris, he said, you took my share. You bought all this with our parents' money. You owe me a real conversation. I'm asking for one. Whit was on his other side. She did the thing she did at the funeral, the soft hand on the heart, the eyes welling. We have been trying so hard to be patient, Iris. You won't even pick up the phone. Bart, near the cheese board, smiled at Mrs. Henley with the practiced calm of a man who sold houses for a living. We are just here to mediate, ma'am. Nobody wants a scene. Diane raised her voice another notch. Honey, she said, family doesn't keep secrets from family. Be the bigger person. You don't need this house more than your brother's children do. It landed like she'd planned it to, the exact same shape as the line Trent had used in my living room on Sunday morning. You don't need this house. Now in front of 40 strangers, dressed up in mother-in-law concern. Marge, on my right, set her cider down quietly. Carolyn on my left did not move. I looked at Diane. I looked at Trent. I looked at Whit. I looked at Bart, who at least had the decency to drop his eyes when mine landed on him. The room was waiting. I reached down to the canvas tote at my feet. I lifted it onto my lap. I opened the top. The jazz finally ended on a soft, sustained chord and didn't restart. I pulled the 4 envelopes out of the tote. White, legal size, hand-addressed in black pen. I set the tote back down. I stood up, 6 steps to where they were standing in the center of the room. I gave Trent envelope A first. He took it because someone hands you something, you take it. He didn't open it, he just looked at me. I gave Whit envelope B. She held it the same way, both hands, like she didn't know what kind of gift it was. I gave Diane envelope C. Her hand twitched as she received it. She didn't squeeze the chair back anymore. She held the envelope flat against her ribs. I gave Bart envelope D. He took it and looked down at it once, and then his face did a small thing it should not have done in public. It went pale. I did not raise my voice. The room was so quiet now you could hear the air conditioning. Inside each envelope, I said, is exactly what each of you has been asking for. Clarity. That was all I said. Carolyn stepped forward from behind my chair. She had her business card already in her hand. She set it on the white tablecloth in front of Trent. Carolyn Pruitt, she said. Partner at Pruitt and Hayes. I'm Iris's counsel of record. I'd strongly recommend reading the contents before you continue this conversation. Trent, slowly, opened envelope A. The will was on top. He stared at the title page for 3 seconds. He flipped to the codicil. He read the line about primary caregiver. He turned to my father's letter, 2 pages of careful cursive on lined notebook paper, and his face did something I had not seen since the funeral. His eyes, for 2 seconds, no more, got wet. Dad wrote this? He said, barely above a whisper. I nodded once. His lower lip trembled. He was about to say something. Maybe to me, maybe to himself. Whit grabbed the letter out of his hand. She's lying. Trent, this is forged. He came back. He shook his head slowly. Whit, he said. That's his handwriting. She turned to him. Her face changed entirely. Trent, don't be weak. She's manipulating you. We talked about this. Diane had opened her envelope and was holding the cease and desist letter in one hand and Carolyn's business card in the other. Her mouth was open. Bart had set his envelope on the cheese board and was staring at the floor. Diane recovered first. She did the thing people do when they've been caught. She got louder. This is an ambush. You invited us here to humiliate us in front of strangers. I did not raise my voice. I did not move from where I stood. Mrs. Caldwell, I said, none of you were invited. You introduced yourselves to Mrs. Henley as family of the new resident. There are 40 people here who heard you do it. Marge stood up at our table. She was 71 and 4'10", and she looked at Diane like a judge who had been waiting for a chance. I heard her say it, Marge said. Mrs. Henley heard her say it. The 2 ladies from 601 heard her say it. Mrs. Henley by the side table nodded once, slow and crisp. I did, in fact. Whit had switched modes. The funeral voice was gone. The tears came easily and fast. Iris, you don't understand what this has done to our family, to Trent. He cries himself to sleep. Do you even care? Do you have any idea what he's been carrying? I looked at Trent. Trent was looking at the floor. Whitney, I said, is the only person in this room who has cried about my mother in front of me, before tonight. My mother. Trent visited her 3 times in 14 months. He stayed 40 minutes the longest time. Bart, near the cheese board, tried to broker. Listen, why don't we all just step outside? Calm down, take a beat. No one is stepping outside, Carolyn said. Her voice was conversational. It carried across the room anyway. The cease and desist is effective immediately. Any further contact with my client comes through me. The packet you're each holding includes my office line. I will respond Monday morning. Diane lifted the envelope toward Carolyn. This is harassment. You can't just... I can, actually, Carolyn said. And I have. Mrs. Caldwell, the privacy violation citation is on page 2. Diane went silent. Trent had not moved from where he stood. He was folding the letter back together with the slow, careful hands of a man who used to fold his father's flag at the funeral. He put the letter in the breast pocket of his shirt. Diane found her voice one more time. She was breathing hard. What do you have to say for yourself, Iris? In front of all these people, look at them looking at you. I did. I looked at the room. 40 residents, my new neighbors, the people who would be my neighbors for the next 20 years if I was lucky, all of them still seated, all of them watching. I looked at Trent. He was looking back at me. His eyes were red. He was not going to apologize. I could see that. I could see all the years of him under the surface, and the wife pulling at his sleeve, and the mortgage and the truck leasing debt and the kids he had with Whit, and the trips he had wanted to take, and the version of him that might still be in there somewhere, but had been very, very busy. I looked at Diane. The lockbox said everything, I told her quietly. You just refused to read. I turned. I walked back to table 4. I sat down between Marge and Carolyn. For about 3 seconds, no one moved. Then Whit grabbed Trent's elbow and pulled him toward the doors. He went without resistance. Diane snatched up her purse from where she had set it. She turned for the casserole. Bart, who had not been told what to do, picked the green Pyrex up from the side table by reflex and held it. Diane stormed past him toward the door. Bart followed, still holding the dish. The doors closed behind them. 4 seconds of silence. Then Marge clapped, just once, very softly. Mrs. Henley cleared her throat. Well, she said, let's get to the food, shall we? 28 days passed. The 4 cease and desist letters were served by certified mail the following Tuesday. The receipts came back signed within the week. Trent had hired a lawyer in Greenville, who returned Carolyn's call within 48 hours and told her, in the polite language attorneys use, that his client did not intend further contact. The lawyer billed Trent $620 and told him to stop talking. Whit unfollowed me on Instagram. Bart's draft listing on the Zillow agent portal disappeared. The North Carolina Real Estate Commission opened a preliminary file on Bart's solicitation and issued him a warning letter. No suspension. Diane sent me one apology card in a pink envelope with a watercolor of a hummingbird on the front. I read it once. I did not respond. I put it in a shoebox in the closet next to the cedar box. Trent sent one email, 4 lines, no subject. I read what Dad wrote. I'm sorry I didn't read it sooner. I won't bother you. I hope you're okay. I saved the email to a folder I named Family. I did not reply. The numbers, when I added them up at the end of the month, $1,840 in legal fees. 4 envelopes served. $0 conceded. 0 follow-up incidents. 1 quiet condo, 4 floors above the Sound, with a closed door and a deadbolt that worked. On the morning of day 29, I opened the cedar box one more time. I'd thought I'd seen everything in it. The owl carving, the wedding band, the photographs, the canvas pocket where Mom had hidden her letter. But that morning, for no good reason except that I wanted to spend a minute with my parents, I lifted out the felt liner at the bottom. Under the liner was a small velvet pouch the color of old red wine. I'd never seen it before in my life. Inside the pouch was my mother's silver locket, the one I'd thought had been sold at the estate sale with the rest of her jewelry. She had taken it out. She had hidden it here for me to find. When I opened the locket, the tiny photograph inside was of me, age 6, sitting on my father's lap on the front porch of the house on Elm Street. I was holding a melted ice cream cone. He was laughing. On the back of the velvet pouch, in my mother's pen, 3 lines. You were always enough, by yourself. Don't forget. Love, Mom. I put the locket on. The chain was short. It sat at my collarbone like it had always been there. Family isn't whoever shares your last name with you. It's whoever read your father's letter the first time and didn't need a second. That's my story. 1 lockbox, 4 envelopes, 40 witnesses, and a quiet locket I still wear. If this reminded you to update your own paperwork, or to keep certified copies somewhere safe, take that as a sign. Drop a comment. Hit subscribe. I'll see you in the next one.